Exercise is something that I wish I had known more about when I was 35. That is a pivotal age that I want your listeners to remember. 35. There's something about 35 when hormones start to decline very subtly. You've got to do something to build muscle mass. Muscles contain more glucose receptors than almost any other part of our body. So by increasing lean body mass, you're preventing diabetes in your future self. The next benchmark for training is age 45. It's imperative. If you've not started resistance training by age 35, you have to by 45. It releases such good feel-good hormones, releasing serotonin, boosting dopamine as well. It's nature's antidepressant. Really, it is.
Hi, everyone. I am super excited today to welcome a truly inspiring guest, Dr. Heather Doty. She is an osteopathic, and I made sure I was pronouncing that right, osteopathic family physician and the founder of Crossroads Health and Wellness, a direct care family medicine practice based in Naples, Florida. Her approach to medicine blends traditional and functional practices, offering her patients a holistic path to better health and wellness. Dr. Doty's passion for wellness extends to her 5 pillars of health: spirituality, sleep, stress management, nutrition, and exercise. Foundational elements she incorporates into her patient care. On top of all that, Dr. Doty is a wife and a mother to 6 children, including 2 adopted from Ukraine, and an advocate for finding balance in every area of life. Whether it's fitness, nutrition, or navigating our healthcare system, Dr. Doty is here to share her expertise and wisdom and practical advice. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Heather Doty to the show. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. I am honored to be here. So inspired by your story too. I'm just thankful to be here.
Thank you so much. It's so important to meet people like you and talk to people like you. And I am so lucky that I get to sit down and talk with you today. And I want to start with the word that I almost mispronounced, osteopathic medicine. I've talked to a lot of people about it. Everybody knows what a traditional MD is. What is an osteopathic doctor?
Yes, your pronunciation is on point.
Awesome.
Super proud of you. That's amazing. So osteopathic medicine, or osteopathy for short, is a form of a way of practicing that started roughly 200-ish years ago, a long time. It's actually been around for quite a while, but there are still people who don't know quite what a DO is. So there are several facets. I will share just a little bit of my story to explain that. I wanted to be an MD from the time I was 12 years old. It was like a light bulb moment. So I wanted to go to Hershey Med School. I'm from Pennsylvania. And I was headed in that path until an anatomy professor of mine in college said, I've gotten to know you a little bit, Heather, and I really think you should check out an osteopathic school. I said, like you, what is that? I have no clue. And I visited one of the local schools in Philadelphia and really fell in love with it. So the principles of osteopathic medicine, like you mentioned, Jace, we look at the whole person. So it's a holistic way of caring for people. So if you come to me with chest pain, I'm going to look at you as a whole person. What's happening in your life? Are there stressors? Could it really be your heart? Is it a cardiovascular issue, or is there something else? So we look at the whole person. Interestingly, when this type of medicine was started, it was started by an MD physician who was an MD and a pastor. So he was a Christian. And he said, we need to have hands on people. We need to be laying hands on them, so to speak. And he created this series of treatments called osteopathic treatments that you may have heard of that are somewhat similar to chiropractic medicine. So not only do we look at people holistically, but we can use our hands to treat people. If you come to me for back pain, I'm going to use my hands to treat your back, in addition to traditional medicines too. So whole person, we use our hands to treat people. We tend to be a little bit more natural leaning than others as well too. So that's just a little bit of a flavor of osteopathic medicine.
It's really great. I've had a few encounters with DOs before, which is the abbreviation for osteopathic doctors. And it really is a different experience. You do really feel like you're trying to, like you said, get to that root cause. What is, or I guess you said you want to be an MD since you were young. I'm sure you're familiar with that process. What is the process like to get your certification or to become a DO versus being an MD? Do you have to still do MD practices? How does that work?
That is a fantastic question. Training is identical, okay. 100% the same. So we go to 4 years of medical school, and that would be an osteopathic medical school. Once you finish those 4 years, you choose what kind of residency or specialty you want to go into. I chose family medicine. So that's a 3-year residency. And I actually trained with MDs and DOs at the same time. So after medical school, the training is typically intermingled. We are all board certified by different boards, but essentially the same type of testing. So the endpoint is identical. The path to get there is a little different just because we need that extra hands-on manipulation training set.
And just like MDs, you pick a specialty.
Yes.
You chose family medicine. What led you into that?
So that's a great question. Originally, I wanted to be a pediatrician. You know, every 12-year-old loves little kids. We all want to babysit. We love the kids. I figured I'll be a pediatrician. I love children. And as I went through my rotations in medical school, I realized that being a pediatrician usually means taking care of sick children. And that just really tugged at my heartstrings. So I felt that wasn't necessarily the path for me, but I love families. There is nothing neater than treating, right now I've got a 3-day-old baby. That's my youngest patient.
Wow.
3 days old, I think, 3 days old. And my oldest patient right now, I believe, is 84. And I have several families who are 3 generations. I get to see the grandparents, the parents, and the grandchildren all in one. And so I just fell in love with this idea. That really, to me, is a deeper level of holistic care. When I understand family dynamics and can take care of everybody in the same family circle, that really is just a neat way to come alongside people.
It really is. Every family is unique, but when you're in a family, you have these shared experiences that can influence your health, whether it be just in the environment or the genes. So that's really incredible that you work with families all together. You eventually started Crossroads Health and Wellness, correct? Crossroads Health and Wellness. What was your path to get there? Did you jump right from school into starting your own practice, or what was your journey before?
Oh, my journey is a pretty tortuous, is the term that we use in medicine for curvy. It was a very curvy. I've done lots of different things, which is another really neat facet of family medicine. So I started my career just as a regular old family doctor in a large company in North Carolina, then ended up in urgent care, just treating bumps and bruises, sprained ankles, putting stitches in. I did that when my kids were little. It gave me a whole lot of flexibility to be at home with them. Then I actually got a teaching position, which was one of the best jobs I've ever had, teaching young doctors. I did that for about 4 years. Loved it. Just the best job ever. And then COVID happened. And I watched as our medical system navigated some uncharted waters. And I became pretty uncomfortable with how things were happening in the particular company that I worked in. And so I decided to stepped away from medicine for a season. I was still working very part-time. Said I would never, ever, ever open up my own practice. Never. End of story. Never.
Never say never.
Never. And God said, I'm asking you to do something different so that you can help people who might not be able to get help or willing to get help from the big system. I said, no. He said, let me rephrase this. Here's the name of the practice. Here's what I want you to do. So I said, okay, yes, sir. And so that was about 2.5 years ago that Crossroads was born. And it was because I came to a crossroads really in my own career. And I wanted to be able to meet people who might be at a crossroads in their health journey, in their family journey, in their spiritual journey, where they're at a point where they need to take a turn. And so I wanted to be with people in that place. So the birth of that practice came out of really my own struggle.
I love the purpose behind the name. Not every name of a company necessarily means something, but actually hearing that is really interesting. You said you've been met with, in your experience, kind of some pathways or some crossroads that led you into the DO path. What were some of the things as you were going down the path of the MD that you said, I want to do this differently. I don't necessarily like how this looks right now?
Yeah, that is such a great question, Jace. So there were a few things. I have such a core belief that I just can't shake. I know that God has created us to be self-maintaining and self-healing in a perfect world. That's how he created us, so that our bodies will heal. Obviously, we live in a day and age where it doesn't always happen. We really do need modern medicine. That is a gift in so many ways, but it shouldn't always be the first go-to. We really just need to give our bodies proper nutrition, proper sleep, stress management, to do the best that it can do within the limitations we have. So when I started to hear some inklings of that in the osteopathic philosophy, that actually is one of our core beliefs, that the body should be able to maintain itself and heal itself, should be able to. That was huge for me. The second thing, when I interviewed at the MD schools, very fiercely competitive. So literally in the first year of med school, there's an auditorium usually full of about 250 first-year students, brand new students. And many times they'll say, look to the person on your left and look to the person on your right. One of you will not be here at the end of this 4 years. It is a really intense weeding out process. Perhaps it should be. However, when I visited the osteopathic school that I went to, they said, we promise you, if we chose you and you made it to this seat, you will make it to the end. Totally different supportive environment. So that just, I obviously resonated with that. I'm very supportive with people around me. So those would be the two things that stuck out to me.
I like that a lot. There's something to be said about the words we give to other people, and just to hear that, going through that experience throws you into less of a panic, which probably flows into your practice. I mean, panic is bad for us. You mentioned to me that you have 5 pillars of health: spirituality, sleep, stress, nutrition, and exercise. I'd love to kind of walk through those one by one with you and talk about why those are so integral to your practice. So
Sure.
we can start, I guess, with spirituality, if you want to start with there.
Yeah, so to me, I see that as the foundation. So if we don't have a spiritual foundation, nothing else matters on top of that. That, again, is just a core belief that I've seen. I became a Christian when I was about 20 years old, radically life-changing experience for me. And when that foundation is firm, you can build upon that. And so I love to incorporate that in my practice, and really just, again, I'm not a pastor, but I think that's such a core part of who we are as human beings that I think we have to start there. So I usually will ask my patients, how are you doing spiritually? Are you praying? Are you meditating on scripture? We know that those things are good for our health. So we have to address that together. So that would be the first foundational principle that we start with.
When I was in the depths of cancer treatment, I found a much deeper connection to spirituality and to God, and found myself praying more than I ever did before. I think it's so common right now, especially when you're young, and especially today, it seems to be more common to maybe lose touch with faith a little bit. And when you find it again, it really is healing. Like, I found it was so healing. So I really love that that's a core belief or a pillar of your practice. Moving on to sleep. I think we all know sleep is important, but tell us from your view.
Oh my gosh, sleep! I love sleep.
We all.
Sleep, I love.
It's the best.
It is the best. It's highly underrated and really a missing link for a lot of people. So patients will come to me stressed, high blood sugar. Their blood sugar might be through the roof, pre-diabetes, all these things. And the very first thing I will ask about is, how are you sleeping? We know that our body will heal itself as much as it's able to during those periods of sleep. And really that ties into nutrition. We can talk about that later on, but it's true rest, digestive rest, physical rest. The body is able to find and repair cells during that time. It lowers our cortisol, it improves our insulin response. And so I think we, especially in this country, have gotten to this place where we really try to be superheroes. I can do it all. I don't need sleep. I'm fine. And we realize that it's really taking a toll on our society. So ideally, 7 to 8 hours for men. Women usually need more, 8 to 9 hours. So I try to make sure that at least on most days, my patients are at least aiming for that sleep. And then it goes even deeper. Sleep sometimes is elusive. Some people try to sleep and they just can't. That's a whole other area. But sleep is a really, really powerful tool that, again, I think would be the next pillar for me. Once we've got that spiritual foundation, sleep is probably the next most important thing.
So important. What do you say? I've met people that go, I need 5 hours of sleep. That's it. And I'm good and I can run about my day. Are those people telling the truth, or is there some falsity in that statement?
So I do think that there are people, it's like anything. There are normatives. So there's this norm, this center percentage of people who need X number of hours of sleep. And then we have these outliers. There are some people certainly who need a lot more. And there are people out there who can survive very well on fewer. I think the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. So if they're healthy, if their labs look great, if they're thriving, they've got good mental clarity, they're doing well, they're probably one of those really fortunate ones that might not need so much. But I think that's a rarity. A lot of people will say, in my office, I just had one yesterday, a young mom, I'm fine on 6 hours of sleep. But that doesn't always translate into what their health experience is.
Our bodies tell us we need sleep. I mean, going through cancer, you're tired, you're exhausted because your body's fighting the hardest battle ever. Just how we're programmed, that should just tell everyone enough. When you need to heal, you need to sleep, and you don't want to get to the point where you're hurting. You want to make sure you have enough sleep so you don't get there. On the topic of sleep, how do you feel about the recreational stimulants that exist around us? And also non-recreational. I mean, we're prescription medications that are highly stimulating, limiting sleep for people. Tell me everything from coffee to Adderall. What are your opinions?
Oh gosh. Yeah, that's a loaded conversation.
Yes.
I really pray that nobody ever takes away my coffee. I don't ever want to see that data. I just hide my eyes from it. Okay. So on that end of the spectrum, the data that we do have is that coffee in moderation, we're not seeing any harms. So caffeine in that quantity and in that form is okay. Then we get down the spectrum toward, we are definitely in an age where stimulants are heavily prescribed. I prescribe them on occasion in my practice. There's a place for them. I think we're in a season where people want an easy button. So I am so overstimulated. I'm on my screen all the time. I'm interfacing with electronics. I'm busy. We live in this age where everything is a 2-second snapshot, and it completely burns out dopamine in our brains. So therefore, we use stimulants to try to bridge that gap. I think the better way to do it would be, why am I lacking attention? I think 75% of our population right now would probably say we have attention issues, but it's not all clinically significant ADHD or ADD. So I guess that's the long way around saying I think there's a place for stimulants, but we really have to be careful with those things. They're hard to get off of. They can deplete our body's own dopamine. So you just need to make sure that you've got the right diagnosis and there is a place for them. I know people who they've got attention issues and there's a place for that. I think anything beyond that is probably leaning toward the harm.
You're saying something really important that I want to go back to for a second. When I think stimulants, I think energy, but you're also kind of showcasing here, it's not just energy, it's your attention is also something that can be stimulated, and that can steal some of your energy. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, so we do. It's so interesting because we use stimulants, and this is always confounding to parents when we use these stimulants like Adderall in a child, for example, who's very hyperactive, and you give them a stimulant and they become focused and they actually calm down. So it's not necessarily a depleting of energy. It's the ability to focus the energy on one particular thing. So I think we just need to we need to use these tools wisely. I will only ever use them if we have exhausted every lifestyle possibility, because we know that there are inherent harms with any kind of chemical substance.
Right.
There's a place for them, and I would never say never, but I want to do all of the natural things first.
I like that. That's a good approach. And I'm somebody who does fall in that category. I believe that traditional medicine sometimes gets demonized unfairly, and I understand why. There have been scenarios where the system has maybe failed us, but we're doing our best. And I think in a lot of cases, it is really helpful to have that medicine. But to your point, exhaust some of the other options first that maybe aren't as harmful on your body. And speaking of harm on your body, something I've done a ton of research out as I've gone through cancer is your third pillar is stress and stress management. Can you talk to us about that?
Boy, that is a tough one. We live in such a stressful time. I mean, there have been times throughout history where life is just stressful. And I've thought about this. You're probably better researched than I am in this area, Jace, but it's something that I think about a lot. How can we get out from under this stress? What is stress? It's our response, right? There are some legitimate stressful experiences. Very tragic experiences are legitimate. However, for 95% of us, the stresses that we experience from day-to-day life, that's just our perception and our response. So it really is response management. Again, there's 5% of times like a cancer diagnosis or a tragic family event, the plane crash that we just heard about yesterday, legitimate stress response experiences that the body is designed to be under duress in those circumstances. And then for the rest of us, stress in the marriage, stress in the home, children, on the job, those things are temporary and we have to adapt to them. Very difficult to do, but I love to teach my patients techniques like grounding, meditation, box breathing is a really awesome technique that you can secretly use and nobody knows about it.
Okay.
Will instantly reduce stress as well. Getting sunlight in the eyes, getting good vitamin D, all of those things can help to negate this normal stress that we all feel.
It's, I dare I say funny, but I'll say funny just because it feels like these solutions are so simple, yet they're so neglected by so many people. And I do feel that people are becoming aware of them now, and I hope we all start doing them. In terms of stress in the environment, I had a guest on the other week, Lee Albert, who does a lot of holistic pain relief practices. And he was talking about the level of stress that exists today, maybe versus years prior. Have you seen an increase in stress in the world?
So I've thought about that as well, too. You know, I think about times in remote history long ago where there were plagues and the Great Depression in the 1930s. That is significant stress. And I think what we're living in now really does not compare to that. So, but I do think, I think as a norm, I do think that the stress level is increasing because I see it in our patients. When our patients, they sit in my chair every day and they're just, they're stressed. So I'm not seeing the data on that. That's a fantastic question, but it's my gestalt, I guess, just my gut feeling that it's increasing.
Yeah, and I appreciate that opinion. And my belief is that there is, I like your point. I mean, the Great Depression, that was some real stress. We were in world wars in the past. I think there's a narrative right now that is almost hypnotic in a sense, that's creating stress for people almost unnecessarily. One way to reduce stress, though, that I know, that is another pillar in your practice, and it's only one part of the pie, but is nutrition. We all know nutrition's important, but I want to hear from you.
We could spend several podcasts on this. So as a family doctor, we get, I'm trying to remember, I did have a small handful of lectures on nutrition, but very, very little in the span of 4 years of education. That's how little it was. It really was all about pharmacology. And there's a place for that. So, no complaints. It's just that we as physicians have very little training in that. I went through one of my crossroads when I left clinical practice about 3 years ago and had free time. I figured I'll get healthy passively, right? Because I have time, therefore I will just automatically be healthier.
Right.
Nothing could have been further from the truth. I was 6 months at home having all this time except for running kids around. That was it. That was really my only job. And I was less healthy than I was when I was really busy. And I thought, this is really not good for a physician. So I actually found a program called The Faster Way to Fat Loss. We leverage intermittent fasting, whole foods nutrition, macro balancing, just focusing on protein, a couple of other things as well. I did that, and no lie, within 6 weeks, I thought, I feel like a different person, and it was nutrition. So I was doing some resistance training as well, but it was almost all nutrition. And I was so impacted by that a year and a half later, I actually became a coach for that company so that I would have that information to help my patients. Nutrition is the hardest piece, I think. It's the hardest. It takes time, it takes planning and understanding, but it is the most important. Super passionate about it. And protein is just, especially for people in my season of life, is just the most important part of nutrition.
Do you believe in plant-based proteins, or are you only animal-based proteins?
That is a great question. So for me personally, my body needs animal protein. So I eat still a lot of plant-based products. So we have to do that to get a balanced diet. There are people, and I think it's a piece of the human genetic makeup that we've not tapped into. I know some people who feel fantastic on a plant-based diet if they can leverage protein. So if they're really mindful of getting that plant-based protein, grams that are appropriate for their body weight and they feel great, I think that's awesome. I'm not one of those people. I wish I was, but I think we're all different. And I've been at this long enough now to know that we are all different. So,
and that's an important point to make. A lot of people like to throw blanket medical advice, and it's truly, it is the truth. Everybody is different. Everybody has their own set of rules that they can learn about, and then once they follow, they're going to feel amazing. I've loved the topic of nutrition too, and I agree we could go on forever. Nutrition has been super important to me. Particularly love antioxidant foods. If you've seen the episodes prior, anybody watching, you know I love my blueberries. It's a go-to for me. But nutrition is, again, only part of the pie, and also is a huge contributing factor to this next piece, which is exercise. Can you talk about that?
So exercise is something that I wish I had known more about when I was 35. That is a pivotal age that I want your listeners to remember. 35. Anytime before 35, our bodies are actually pretty resilient, and you can do a lot of things to maintain overall health. There's something about 35 when hormones start to decline very subtly. So 35 is the first benchmark that I think it's really important to make sure you're doing resistance training specifically. You've got to do something to build muscle mass. Muscles contain more glucose receptors than almost any other part of our body. So by increasing lean body mass, you're preventing diabetes in your future self. So 35 is hugely important. The next benchmark for training is age 45. It's imperative. If you've not started resistance training by age 35, you have to by 45. That is 3 days a week, 30 minutes at a pop, nothing extensive, but you've got to build lean body mass because at that point, you start to lose about 2 to 3% per year passively. So super important to me. And you guys are just fitness gurus. It releases such good feel-good hormones, releasing serotonin, boosting dopamine as well. It's nature's antidepressant. Really it is.
I had the privilege of being treated by Dr. Bruce Knackfor, who is at the forefront of exercise oncology right now. And he totally opened up my mind to the importance of musculoskeletal mass, if I'm saying that right. Not a doctor, not trained. I'm going to butcher some of these terms. But there's incredible correlation between muscle mass and effectiveness of certain cancer treatments and also mortality rates. There are correlating data between the two, all pointing to if you have it, you're going to do better. So it's super important to exercise. What would you say to somebody who is older than that kind of range you said, older than that 45? Is it too late for them to start? Is it too far gone at that point?
Never too late.
Okay.
That is a great question. I have a lot of patients in my own practice in that 60 to 70 year range. So for women, that's when they're in this season that's post-menopause where hormones are really declining. Men's testosterone levels are declining as well. It is never, ever, ever too late. It becomes more difficult to build muscle mass in that time frame, but you certainly can improve your bone strength, which is so important when you do resistance training, preventing hip fractures as you age. And it's good for posture as well, fall prevention. And if nothing else, you'll be able to maintain what you have. You just don't want to prevent any further muscle wasting. So it is never, ever, ever too late. But I wish I had known to start earlier.
And then the other age he says was 35. I want to go backwards and talk to, especially people my age. I think, and I'll speak being this age, I think a lot of us feel, you have that I'm going to live forever kind of mentality. Obviously, that was ripped away from me quickly this year. But a lot of us neglect doing it now as opposed to doing it later. What would you say to somebody before that age of 35 who says, I don't really need to work that hard to maintain my fitness because my metabolism is incredible right now, or whatever reason? Do they need to start soon so they can prevent problems later?
Yeah, so any age is important. So even if they can maintain their own muscle mass pretty easily naturally, it's just so good for hormone health. It really is good. So that's a whole other conversation, especially for women. Women who exercise are going to stabilize their hormones in a way that perhaps could prevent things like polycystic ovarian syndrome and infertility in that time of life as well too. So there are many, many reasons. And I think there's just so much to be said for consistency in small little increments. So this is not about being a weekend warrior or when you hit 35, all of a sudden you're going to hit the gym. If you do this really in small little sound bites, very incrementally, but really consistently through a lifetime, gosh, it just pays dividends at the end. My father is 75 and he was on the ski slope yesterday.
Wow.
And so he just has been very consistent. He's not a gym guy. He is now in his 70s, but he wasn't always before. But it's just those little consistent commitment to your health over the years that really, really add up.
If that's not motivation enough, I want to be snowboarding at 75 or skiing. That's incredible. That's amazing. If somebody's listening to this and they go, I'm really interested in maybe looking into working with a DO, maybe even working with you, what does that process look like? Maybe they're nervous to go in. Could you walk me through what a new patient would experience working with somebody like you?
Yeah, so I work in a type of practice called direct primary care. That's something we haven't touched on. So that type of practice model is not concierge. Down here in Southwest Florida, that's kind of the term that's thrown around down here. It's actually a little different. Direct primary care is what I would encourage your listeners to search for. And I can give you actually a really good search engine for direct primary care practices all over the country. There are thousands and thousands and thousands. And there are doctors just like me who have elected to leave the system, not all the ideology necessarily, but just the system, because we want our patients to have access to me. So if you were my patient and you needed something from me, you text me. And I pick up my phone and I answer and text you back. If you need to see me, I can usually see you tomorrow, later today, or we'll do a video visit. It is a beautiful way to take out the middleman and really just get back to the doctor-patient relationship the way it was supposed to be. So I would have them search for direct primary care. And then within, again, I'll send you the link, within the search features, you can usually search for DOs. And many of us will be, not all DOs are the same. It's like anything else. But many of us will be more like-minded in terms of holistic health being of importance in the practice and spending time and listening and all of those things.
I will get that link from you. We'll put it in the show notes for anybody that's interested. We talk about kind of removing from the system, this other system that exists. And there's so much to be said about that system. Good things, kind of a gray area almost as well. I want to talk about that gray area between traditional and functional medicine. What challenges are faced in this space? What are your opinions? What is the gray area?
That is a great question. And that's a realization that I came to probably within the last 6 months as I'm trying to figure out where the heck am I, really? Because I went on this journey not really having a clear idea of what the space looks like. I spent 20 years in this system, and I use that in quotes. There are wonderful things about our healthcare system. You just took advantage of many amazing things about our healthcare system. That high level of expertise when you really need it is just so important. Where I find the most difficult pieces is really in primary care. So OBGYN, family medicine, internal medicine, where the average physician sees 3,000 patients. 3,000 patients. That would be average. Some see more, usually 30 to 50 patients per day. And so in this model, which I'll talk about that gray area in a second, we see about the average direct primary care physician will see around 300 to 600 patients. So we know everybody. If you call, I'm going to know who you are. So this gray area for me, I should talk about the opposite area. So if traditional medicine is over here, and it's a very big, robust system, the other side, and again, there are good pieces to this too. I would consider the other side to be the functional medicine aspect, where they're doing very deep dives, extensive lab tests, things like that, to really get to the root cause. There's a place for that too, for sure. It's pretty costly for patients. Insurance doesn't usually cover it. So I find myself in the middle of both. So I bring with me everything that I had the honor and the privilege of learning from traditional medicine and my osteopathic training, and then I dabble a little bit in the functional space. I've found sometimes that when patients go directly to the far side of the spectrum, they tend to come back to me with a lot of supplements, and they still don't necessarily feel well all the time. And so I think if we borrow a little bit from both and just use a whole lot of common sense and really listen to our patients, that's the gray area for me. And I'm still figuring out, I still don't have a great descriptor of that, but that's where I find myself living right now.
One of the reasons I'm enjoying this conversation so much is you're so credible in the world of holistic and integrative medicine that exists. What I've seen happen in a lot of cases is a lot of people are coming forward after learning this knowledge, which is great knowledge, but maybe sharing the information in a way that could potentially be harmful. Do you see anything out there right now that is risky in terms of people sharing integrative or holistic medicine practices that might not be good for anybody?
Yeah, that is something that I wrestle with every day. And this is where my faith is my foundation. So I pray because I do not have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. And so I'm praying for every patient. Lord, show me the truth for them, for that particular patient in this moment. What's best for Jace? What's best for my next patient? Not necessarily what the textbooks say or even what the labs say sometimes, what's best for you. So for me personally, I have to cover everything in prayer. But there was one thing that I did see on social media. I'm on a lot of mom groups, more crunchy mom groups, which I love. I love that community.
Yes.
They want to make the best decisions for their families. Traditional medicine is often villainized, rightly so sometimes in those communities. And one thing that did catch my attention, there's been a lot of pneumonia going around in our community. This year we've had a really bad year for influenza. And sometimes those viral infections, which do not require antibiotics, will linger for 2, 3, 4 weeks. And sometimes a bacteria can just slip in there and cause what we call a secondary infection. And in some of these posts and communities, I'm hearing a lot of hesitancy against antibiotics, and I will prescribe them only if I have to. Really, very rarely would it be a first line of treatment for me, with the exception of strep throat or something like that. But the moms were really fearful of antibiotics. And with my living in this gray space, I think you've tried all the things. You've tried all the things to take care of this infection. Now I'm really concerned that there's a bacteria that you might need an antibiotic for. So I think that would be one really present day example where I think we could be causing harm if we're unwilling to see it from both spaces.
Personally, when it comes to antibiotics, my fear is always, what I've read about is the damage it can do to your gut microbiome,
Yes.
which is a super popular topic right now. You mentioned the crunchy mom groups. I love those groups. I think my spirit animal is a crunchy mom because I do that research and I share that same love for the people around me, especially my family. Tell me about your take or the research you've done around kind of that gut microbiome that exists within us.
So I've got a whole list of things that I'm just trying to unlearn and relearn, and the gut microbiome is kind of halfway down here. So I'm really doing a deep dive into vaccines, into statins, into women's hormones and health, and then the gut microbiome is somewhere in there. I don't know the answer to that, and I don't know that we're there yet. There are some people I follow. I think she's called the Fasting MD. Dr. Amy Shaw is excellent. She's really well known for her knowledge in that area of the gut microbiome and has fascinating things to say about it. So what I know in my very elementary knowledge, if I give somebody an antibiotic, I better be darn sure that there's a good reason for it. And I'm going to try to target it to the exact infection and not just blow up the whole gut microbiome. I know it's going to take time to recover it. So I'll make sure they're taking a good probiotic and maybe a supplement that helps to replace what we call IgG in their gut as well too. So just supporting patients. But that's a little bit of a Pandora's box for me still that I'm fascinated by, but just not an expert.
I want to commend you on being a medical professional that can say, I don't know. I think a lot of them don't. And I think sometimes when they don't, they look for the bottle that says it has the answer. And then they say, I know, here it is. So hearing that honesty is so important and just speaks even further to the type of relationship that you say you have with your patients. And I know you work with some of our team as well, and they share that same testimony. I know I can speak for them. In terms of the medical system, this traditional side, moving away from the holistic and being more conventional, what do you think the current state of the American medical system is, and what changes do you think could improve it, or do you think it's good?
Right. So I think I am part of the system. So when I say the system, I am still part of it, trained from the system. I think we have done the very best that we could. So I practiced for 20 years doing the very best that I could with the knowledge that I had. And now I think we are in a place where, and I think Jace, you said it so well, we have to be willing to say, I don't know. Let's take another look at this. So when we're considering things like vaccine safety, informed consent is it's hugely important to me. I think you deserve to understand the risks and the benefits to anything you take. There are always both. And so there's always a balance. I really feel like that is I think transparency of the medical evidence is huge. I think I'm going to use the term big pharma. I think there is a place for pharmacologic therapy, for sure. You've benefited from it. My patient with pneumonia benefited from it. I think it is a big business. I think we need to make it a smaller business. I think we need to separate the funding of those studies to non-biased third parties so that we can actually have true evidence. I think sometimes the evidence that we are given as physicians is a little skewed. And it's really, even as a physician, it's very difficult sometimes to look between the lines of these studies to find truth. So my desire is that we would have truth. And it's very difficult to find. I hope that we can come together in the next few years or so and hopefully give our patients informed consent, both sides of the story, to any medical treatment that they take, and then help them walk out the path that's best for them, right?
One of the biggest issues I see and hear in discussions is broad generalization of groups. And that is I think the American medical system has fallen victim to that, because when I've done research and have met other cancer patients, I can't tell you how many people said, if this clinical study did not exist, I would not be here today.
Right.
And no amount of blueberries, antioxidant fruits or vegetables would have been able to save me in time. And that's where I think that issue can be unfair. It can be pushed on them a little bit. To your other point, there is a level of greed that exists within that system. And I think it's with specific groups, but because they're all under this umbrella, it's so quick to just broadly generalize and say, this isn't right and this isn't fair. You mentioned some medical interventions such as vaccines. You said that's kind of at the top of your list in terms of things you're talking about or learning about. Very polarizing topic, of course. How do you approach these conversations with your patients?
Yeah, so I tell my parents, first of all, I also believe that it's a parent's right. I'm not the parent of their child. And so having children is a huge responsibility. I feel the weight of parenting my own kids. So I know the heaviness of that. So what I was seeing in North Carolina, and this is a true story, I was seeing that families were afraid to go to the doctor up there because if their child was not fully vaccinated, not unvaccinated, but just not fully vaccinated, there were many clinics who would not see them. So the result of that, I was seeing babies who were having medical issues and their parents were afraid to bring them to the doctor. And that was really grievous to me. I thought, how have we gotten to this place where people are afraid to come to see their physician? So my heart is to create a safe place where these families can come to regardless of what they decide. I'm neither pro-vaccine nor anti-vaccine. I want to know the truth. I want them to make an informed decision. And I want to support them as parents of that child through that process. So that's really, we just talk through. We talk through their genetics, their personal experience, their questions. We talk about the evidence as best as I know it. And I try to support them to make the best decision that they know for their child.
We are all individuals, but we can work together.
Right.
That's what's important.
Right.
Looking ahead, what are you most excited about in terms of the future of medicine and wellness that you've seen?
That question just got me really encouraged and excited because I feel like the tides are turning, and I don't think it's medicine. I actually don't think it's the medical institution that's changing. I think that will change last. I think we as people are waking up. You guys, your team is incredible. The little bit that I know about you and how much you have focused as a team on your own health and your own well-being and really pursuing wellness is incredibly inspirational to me. That's the change. So it took me almost 50 years to figure this out as a physician. So it's not coming from the medical community. I really think it's coming from just we as people are learning we've got to do something different so that we can feel well, so that we can do everything that God's called us to do, so that we can continue to be the amazing people we are. So I really think that the tides are turning, but I think the people are changing first. And then I think the doctors, we're all pretty scared as physicians. We're not as brave as people would think. And so I think it's taking us a little longer to come around, but I think eventually, I think we're going to end up in a beautiful place where we can leverage what modern medicine has to offer and still allow our bodies to do what they were created to do. And so that we as a population cannot be among the bottom percentile for health in the world, but we can be at the top because we're doing the right things naturally.
We're building for a better future. That's how it always is. And sometimes that means we need to take some step backwards, maybe in certain areas, but not everywhere. For listeners who want to improve their health and wellness, what's one piece of advice you would encourage them to start today?
eat more protein.
Eat more protein. I love
Spoken as a midlife person, I still think that's good for anybody, but I would say focus on your protein. Protein first, good quality protein. 30 grams at every meal minimum is a great start.
That's fantastic. Where can people find you and learn more about your practice and upcoming projects?
So I spend most of my time working for Crossroads Health and Wellness, which is my direct primary care clinic here in Florida. The website is crossroadsdpc.com. Now you know what DPC means. So they can reach out to me there. I'll send you my email that you can put in the show notes. I'd be happy to talk. I love to talk nutrition, fitness. I can get you pointed in the direction of a DPC physician if you don't have one. I'm also getting ready to launch sort of an arm of my clinic that's just focused on midlife women's hormones. So that's coming in March, so you can be on the watch out for that. I'm super encouraged by that and happy to help. I love dialoguing with people who want to feel well again.
I will put all that in the show notes. Please, if you're interested to connect, go look for that. And I just want to thank you again for coming on. I was so excited for this, and you blew past my expectations of what this conversation was going to be. I look forward to staying connected with you, and I would love to start working with you, honestly. So again, thanks for coming on, and thanks for sitting down with me.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor, Jace.
Awesome.